before I get too far along on this 65 Mustang floor pan, I wanted to show you the new floor pan. Now I picked this up from Mustangs Unlimited a couple days ago, and it was crated, and I just want to show you how they come. It's got the steel box that runs the perimeter of the whole floor pan, and that's pretty nice. Just that alone lets you know that they're doing a good job of putting it together just for shipping. But it comes on that steel box, and then it had a wooden crating on top of it, and this sat on top, and then around the perimeter was all these pieces right here. So it just boxed it in real nice. Now this is kind of heavy with the, with this tubing and everything assembled. So obviously I loaded onto the trailer and I started uncrating it. It does come with these, I believe, are the brackets for mounting your bumper in the rear, and everything else is in place, which is really nice. As you can see, there's the full cross member where the tranny goes. Of course, the floor supports already installed. Seat risers already in place. All the welds are, your standard spot welds. Frame rails. Let me back up here a little bit. There you go. So I'm really happy with this. Just show you that. There's the trunk pan extensions, and of course where your gas tank goes. But the last one of these I did, I removed what this is basically the inner rocker panel. When you look at the car, you have the outer and you have the inner. Well, the last one I did, this was rather thin. The metal was not real good, and it made it simpler to remove this piece, drill out all the spot welds along the edge here where it would have mounted originally anyway, for the floor pan and everything else. So I have to debate right now whether I want to use these pieces and drill off the original inner rockers, or if I'm going to remove these pieces and use the originals. I guess there's an advantage one way or the other, but at this point I'm not really sure. I'll just have to look at it a little more and make that decision. I know it was simpler to remove them from the other pan, but again, they were lighter gauge metal, so I'll just have to make that decision when I get into it. But I just wanted to show you this pan before I got started, and really nice. And this is supplied through Dynacorn. So you've got to remember too, when this is made, they're building the whole car. So that's why they pre-built it with those inners. And I also picked up a Dynacorn firewall, which I'll show you in a little bit. And we're going to do the whole deal onto this car. It's going to be rock solid when it's done. And there's the firewall that also came from Mustangs Unlimited, and it's a product of Dynacorn. And this is coated in weld-through primer as well, so anything I need to do to it is ready to go. And with that, I wanted to show you more of this Mustang. Of course, this is at 65, and I already showed you this top up here that was pretty scary looking. That's pretty scary looking. However, like I said, I've got the new cowl to go in it, and that's going to take care of all that stuff. Moving on, as you see, the floor is gone. Most of it. I still have to get the hump out, and the floor support boxes right there. But I went and bought a plasma cutter from Harbor Freight, and within maybe half an hour I cut out the whole back of this car. Now of course I'm gonna have to come back in and dress this all off. You know, we got a flange left here now, and depending on how I want to do these wheelhouses, whether I use them or rebuild them or replace them, I'll decide that a little later. But I'll trim off these edges, and that'll give me a location when I put the new floor up in place. So, good progress. This little Harbor Freight plasma cutter, man, as fast as I moved the wand or the lead, however you want to label it, it was cutting it. I mean, just right through it. And it never hesitated, never gave me any grief, which is a good thing. So, I will continue on. I'm going to cut out some of those sections up there as I remove the floor support boxes. But everything else is looking pretty good. So, good progress. I'm happy to see that floor out. And still got some, detail work, cleaning up these edges, getting rid of this stuff. But all in all, I'm pretty excited. Really making a dent in this project. I almost neglected to show you the pan that I cut out. And you can see I just cut along the perimeter, and the complicated part was down here in this box, because that's the main support for the rear frame rail. So I had to, cut away pieces to make my way into it. And once I got in there, just cut them off and beat it on with a hammer a little bit, and it came right apart. And there's the edge that I cut around the wheelhouse. And I also zipped off the rest of the quarter panel up here, and then did the same thing on this wheelhouse. Now I'm pretty excited. I'm going to get this thing back together. It's going to be looking good. Well, as I'm making progress on this 65 Mustang and removing the inner, I decided to remove the inner rocker panels because they were rusted through, and I'm going to use the ones that came with the floor pan. But I wanted to show you something that I find interesting. I've already started cutting loose both the inners. Now, I took a plasma cutter, my plasma cutter, and I cut just about an inch below the seam here. That way, when I ground through the welds, I could chisel and not have to beat the thing apart. And so I could chisel back against, the structure of the outer rocker. But this is interesting to me, because in the span from the corner of the door jamb all the way to the back where the inner rear seat would sit, I counted 27 welds. Each one of these little black marks is where the welds are. Now, when you're doing a collision job, by law, you have to restore every one of the welds that's removed. That way it's not too strong or too weak from the original design. So that's why I do this. I indicate where the welds are so I can duplicate the pattern and put them back in. Now, as I said, you can kind of see I wrote it there. There's 27 welds on the right side. Go over here and look at this. Here's the left side. Look at how close those welds are together. All the way back into this area, there are 38 welds on this inner rocker, just on the upper section on the driver's side. That just shows you the difference in technology. Today, of course, everything's done with a robot. It's on a jig and a pattern, and it's programmed, and it does all the work like it's supposed to. But this shows you that in 1965, you had one guy doing one side, and you had one guy doing the other side, and they probably just didn't really even have an idea as to how many welds it was supposed to take, so they just ballparked it. And just really surprised that there's a difference of 11 welds just in that short distance. So I'm going to probably duplicate something along the lines of this side over here with the 38. Maybe not quite as extreme back here in this corner. One every, 3/8 of an inch. A little overkill on that, but just remarkable to me that there's that much of a difference from side to side. So stay tuned, I'll keep driving on. Okay, I think I'm ready to set this floor pan in place and start welding it, and I just want to show you a couple things. I prepared the floor pan. I drilled holes. I remember I talked about how many holes there were on each side, and I think it was 28 and 39 or something. But what I wanted to show you was I just picked up a 2-inch pattern, which really mimics what was on the passenger side, and I drilled those all the way back on 2-inch centers. I did the same thing on the other side. You can kind of see them there. And then I also looked at the floor pan, the floor supports. They're of course already installed on here, but I took one of the original pieces, and you can see the poor pattern they had. There's really 2 rows of 5. So I simplified that, and I measured from this front edge to back here on the existing, and I'll show you that in a second, the main boxes up front. I had 8.5 inches to work with from point A to point B. So I just split the middle and then divided it up evenly. So there's 2 rows of 5, 2 rows of 5, and 2 rows of 5. Other than that, the floor pan itself is ready to go. From there, I did a couple little things. I had to trim off some material that was left here on this back seat support. I went ahead and cut off the flange where the wheelhouses are, because I'm just going to go ahead and replace those, rebuild them later on. But a couple other things. This is a perfect opportunity. You can see there's some rust that was inside the outer rocker panel, and this was a perfect opportunity to treat that rust. And I also treated it in a variety of places as I went along, and took care of that. Did that on both sides, and then I cleaned up the metal where these original welds were, so that when I put the panel up in place, it'll be ready to go. And then I also cleaned up the edges on all the bottom row. Other than that, everything is cleaned up and ready to go back together. I just need to get it in here and jack it up in place. And as you can see, the firewall's all cut out now. And I'm just going to drive on and try to get this thing together tonight yet. And this is where all the preparation pays off. The pan is up in place. I did post a time-lapse video on my page showing how I put it up. I basically just slid it up underneath the car and then jacked it up into place. It fit just right. In fact, I want to show you, there's that measurement I had. I measured from the front, and on the previously when I was measuring out my holes, 8.5 inches to the edge. And of course, I can come around to the front here, and you can see that it lapped right into where the original panel or original piece went. So I still have to do some more welding, but the main part of it is in place. Out here, that wraparound corner came in right where it was supposed to go, and along with that, everything up on the top here where the floor meets the inner rocker meets the outer rocker, it's right back where it was. So that all lined up, and of course I've welded in place. You know, I took a bunch of clamps and clamped it in. A couple little things I wanted to point out. Down here, there is a notch, and this is on the new piece. And if you look, there's kind of a corner right here on the outer rocker, and that notch fits in that opening, and that's exactly where it's supposed to be. I'm not sure if there's a notch there too. Line right up. So everything's in place. The main upper section is welded, and what I'm going to do now, as you can see daylight through these holes. All that means is this rocker in the middle here is pretty close, but back here is a little off, and I'm going to jack that up, put some pressure on it, put it in place, because that metal is going to want to straighten out naturally, but it's supposed to be curved up a little more to finish out the shape. I'll get that welded, take care of that, and then a couple other things. I'm going to come in here and weld those seat points, and you can see I had this situation before. That's where a seatbelt mounts, and all I'm going to do is just trim that hole open a little bit, no big deal, and weld those in place. As far as everything else, I did measurements, and the drop from the top here where the channel is, where the trunk is, drop from here to here on both sides was within a 1/16 of an inch, so I was real happy with that. That tells me it's good and square, or good and square as far as the plane of the car. There are a couple little anomalies over here. This wheelhouse, you can see, because these had a flange that kind of rolls back in. I should, kind of goes back in like this. And this one's going to line up perfect. This one is a little bit off, but when these things were built, they weren't necessarily dead center perfect anyway. But I'll be able to take care of that when I get the new one put in. The other things, this kit came with 4 mounts for your bumper, and these are the 65 mounts. They're a little bit taller, and these are the later model. And I can show you that over here on the original. A little bit taller mount, so I'll put those in later on. At this point, I'm going to finish welding up the rocker on the outer sections, and once that's all in place, then I'm going to tackle the cowl and get out the plasma cutter again and do some hacking. So it's looking good. It's looking a lot more like a Mustang again. Just needs some more metal on it.